and salute the flag.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I need a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
I have Tracy and Eric.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Thank you.
At this point, we would like to recognize, Ray's unable to be here tonight, but we definitely want to recognize Pat and the 3 terms that she has given to the students here at Greenville Central School. I know I am going to miss her leadership, as I'm sure everyone else is. So I want to say, on behalf of myself and everyone here, thank you, thank you, thank you. And we have just a little something to help you remember us, if the memories aren't enough. If the memories are not enough.
I want to thank all the community members that voted me in and gave me this opportunity. It's been a pleasure, really an honor to work for such a wonderful school district. To see all the things that have happened over the past 9 years, the achievements and accomplishments, could only happen when people work together and do the best they can for their students. And it's been an honor and a privilege to watch it. And thank you to all of you for all that you do for the district. Thank you.
Thanks, Pat.
Thank you, Pat.
Okay, enough of that. Open forum.
Okay. Let's see what we have. Just do a refresh. I don't have anything.
Not yet, no. So checking to see if there's anyone responding to open forum.
Okay?
No, there's nothing. There's always the open forum at the end.
Okay. Okay, now we have a presentation. Malcolm, from Need and Risk Management.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Malcolm Tuffalo. I'm the Manager of Emergency and Threat Assessment Services for Need and Risk Management, the School District Safety and Health Consulting Group. And tonight, I just wanted to take a few moments of your time to speak about the district-wide school safety plan. Within New York State, we have 2 different types of emergency plans that help us prepare for all different types of emergencies, all different types of eventualities within our school districts. We have the building level emergency response plan, which is fully confidential. Every building in the district has one. It includes information such as all of the building level team members, their contact information. It includes maps of the buildings. It includes information on our non-ambulatory students. It includes a lot of very safety-sensitive information, including the specific ways that we lock out, that we lock down, that we evacuate, where we would go if we needed to do reunification. It provides those very specific procedures. And as a result, that plan is completely confidential. We share it with anyone who needs it. It's on a need-to-know basis. But what I want to take a second to talk about today, we're preparing what we are putting out for public comment, is the district-wide school safety plan. The district-wide school safety plan is a public plan, and essentially what it does, it lays the foundation for all of our safety procedures, all of emergency response procedures within the school district. It provides us with an opportunity to share with our community members, with our staff, with our faculty, with our board members, with parents, with students, all different initiatives that we have ongoing. It really lays the groundwork for everything that we want to do in terms of safety within our buildings. It provides us with the opportunity to make the membership of our district-wide Safety and Health Committee public, to make sure that we're meeting all of the requirements put forth by New York State and Safe Schools New York. It allows us to speak about some of the facilities initiatives that we have to promote security, some of the building initiatives that we have to promote culture, and it allows us to really dig deeply into all of our safety procedures and provide an opportunity and a forum for community members to both understand what we're doing and also make comments on what we're doing. The good news is that this plan, a lot of it's prescribed by New York State. We have requirements that we need to make therein. For the most part, our district-wide plan remains relatively static on a year-to-year basis. The one big addition this year that we worked on in the winter and is going to be affecting us in the future is the Public Employer Health Emergency Response Plan, also known as the Pandemic Operations Plan. And what that does, that plan was developed over the past few months, just sort of as a lessons learned from everything that we've had over this past 15, 18 months. So that way we can build on past experience, and should something like the past year and a half ever occur again, that we have a plan, that we have a structure, that we have a foundation for that moving forwards. But our district-wide safety plan, it's really, I always think of it as the backbone for everything that we do with our emergency plan within the school district.
Any questions for Malcolm?
Thank you.
Thank you, Malcolm.
Thank you all for your time.
Okay, the end-of-year report, the administrative team.
Good evening. So I'm here tonight with some of our administrative team to go over our end-of-year report. This all falls under the umbrella of our continuous school improvement work. So this is really a piece of looking at some data from this past year, the 2021 school year, and planning for the upcoming year of 21-22. This is a process that we continue to evolve and adapt and make better every year in terms of looking at how we perform as a district and what areas we're going to focus on for improvement. So tonight, to start with the board, you have a folder in front of you. For board members, it's that nice maroon folder. I just want to go through all the different pieces that are in there. There's a lot of information here. I'm just going to go through so you have an idea of what each packet in there is. On the top of your pile is a copy of the slides for tonight. This will also be shared with you digitally because there's some links in here that you can click on to look at more information, further details. But the first thing in there is just a copy of your slides. You flip to the next thing. There is a copy of the School Improvement and District Goal Development Calendar for 2021-2022. So earlier this school year, the board adopted this calendar for the year, looking at, again, the process of reflecting on this past year of 2021 and the improvement planning cycle that will go throughout this coming school year for school improvement. So that's the adopted calendar. The next three items are building profiles. So this is something that has come out of our school improvement work. Education for the Future is a group that we worked with for several years, 5 or 6 years ago. And one piece that we've continued to update each year is a building profile. So for each building in our district, elementary school, middle school, high school, there is a profile that has data. It is by no means every single piece of data that we have for each building, but it is a summary document for each building that looks at 3 different categories of data, and I'll touch on that a little bit more in just a minute. But you have a building profile for elementary, a building profile for middle school, and a building profile for high school. So you'll have plenty of reading material when you go home tonight for the rest of the week.
Thanks.
The next item in your packet is something that's new, or not new, but it looks a little different than it has in the past. Every year we try to catalog and track what are the things that we worked on from this past year and how did we do in making progress. This past year we were an identified school as a target district or a TSI school, targeted support and improvement for our middle school, that required us to do specific things for New York State Education Department. Something good that has come out of that is the standardized process that we use at all 3 buildings, as well as the district. So there's lots of acronyms in here. DSIP is the district plan, District Comprehensive Improvement Plan, and SEP is the individual building plans, School Comprehensive Education Plan. The chart that the board has in front of them is basically a summary of what was in each of the SEPs, or the building plans, and in that DSIP, the district plan, and it tracked some of the qualitative things, actions that we said we were going to take. If we were able to complete them, we said yes, and it shows up in green. If it's something that's still in the works or we at least got started on something, it says partial and it will show up as yellow. If it's something that we did not get to or things changed and we decided not to do something, it says no and it shows up as red. For quantitative, numeric data, it will show you same kind of idea. It will show you targets that we set for different areas of improvement. If it's an area that we reached that target, it will show up in green. If it is an area that we did not meet our target, it will show up in red. So again, it's a quick visual if you look for red, green, and yellow, but then again, there's a lot of information that you can dig into. One thing I will say, when you see some reds, also track back to the left to see, well, we didn't meet our target, but go back, did we actually make improvement? Are we going in the right direction? So in some areas, well, we may have improved 7%, but our target was 10% improvement. So we didn't meet our target and it's red, but we are still at least going in the correct direction. So again, this document has a lot of information, but it is meant as an evidence of completion for all the different improvement plans at the district level and then each building level that we had for this past year. And then last but not least, we wanted to include an update for athletics for the year. So there is a Patron Conference All-Stars that Denise will use as part of her update when we get to that portion later on in our presentation. So that's just overview of what's in your packet. Any questions on that? Okay. So looking a little closer at one of those documents is the School Improvement and District Goal Development Calendar. So I have outlined in a red box up on the screen really the 2 items that go along with tonight's meeting. So that June 28th Board of Education meeting, we made it, we are here, we are at the end of June. School ended on Friday. So in that time between Friday and today, really last week and today, the admin team spent time together today, trying to put as much of this data together as possible that made sense. So in those building profiles, as much data as we can get updated is updated, but it's important to note that we will also continue to update and share new versions. So for example, some Regents data. For those students that took our Regents exams last week, some of that data was just coming in today after it was scored. So that is not included in here, but when we have that processed and we pull apart the data, we will include it in those profiles. But for tonight's meeting, the purpose, there's really 2. One is to give an overview of that end of year report and look at how we did in the areas of evidence completion for our improvement plans. And then 2, with that in mind and reflecting on this past year, as an admin team, we've started some thoughts and conversations of what do we see as our priorities for the upcoming year, 21-22, that will go into our district level plan. So again, those are the 2 pieces for tonight. Really a very high level overview and reflection on this past year, with a lot of this data is very fresh and new, and we are still processing it. So again, by no means are we going to get into every single little minute detail tonight, but what we wanted to do is provide an overview of that end of year report and a reflection of how we did on those improvement plans. And then looking forward to the coming year, 21-22. So for tonight's presentation, we're going to break this down into really 3 main areas of data. And we've shared this with the board before. Again, as I've mentioned a couple times, we continually look at our school improvement processes and try to refine them and make them stronger and make sure we grow off of what we've done in the past. This idea of different categories of data comes from that same Education for the Future school improvement work that we've done over the past 7 or 8 years. So for tonight, we're going to give you demographics. So examples, some attendance data, some discipline data, student learning, so some iReady data. You've heard a lot about iReady, some iReady data, some information on course failures for middle school, high school, just as a couple of examples of student learning. And then last but not least is perception data. Really, that is our annual survey that we do with students, faculty, and parents. So again, some quick summaries of perception data. So we're going to break this down: demographic, student learning, and perception. Brooke is going to do our demographic section. Mr. Hashdan is going to do the student learning section with a little assistance from me. And then Mr. Reeve is going to do our perception data. And then last but not least, Ms. Wickham will give her athletics update after all of that. Okay, just want to make sure I hit all of my points. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brooke to give some information on demographics.
I think I'm on. All right. Welcome. Thank you. Yeah, so a few highlights for the demographic areas. This year, due to our pandemic, we thought that we were going to share some of our updated information on our COVID cases as well as closures, and then a comparison between us and a few of the other surrounding districts. So if you look at the first chart, it's the number of COVID cases that were broken down by schools. The number of total positive cases is in the first row. The second is our on-site cases, as well as the next, going over to the next one, off-site, and then our number of staff of our COVID cases. And then in the center chart shows the number of closures and or fully remote days that have occurred this year due to our pandemic. And then in the last chart are the breakdown per school. So all in all, you know, we've, despite this pandemic, have had a very successful school year and have met the New York State Education Department requirements of 180 days of instruction. So it was a very productive year, given the uniqueness of the challenges of the pandemic. So then on to our next area has to do with our chronic absenteeism, and that as well is broken down into buildings, as well as starting in the 18-19 school year with our ESSA data, and then our target through our DSIP and the SEP plans, June 21st, and then the final target. So just a brief overview of this: elementary rates of chronic absenteeism have increased. Our middle and high school had decreased rates of chronic absenteeism, as well as our middle school, kudos to you, Brian, has met the SEP target at that 8%. And Mr. Hash, sorry, don't leave you out.
Excuse me, Brooke, before
Yes.
moving on, I think it's clear, but just to be sure, final target means just what the actual absentee rate was, right?
Yeah, and you can reference that back into this document that Todd has in your packet.
I think he was meaning the label. It's not a target, that's the actual number.
Oh, yes, I apologize.
Oh, it's
Sorry.
okay. And so the June 21 target is actually the June 21 number, or as opposed to a target?
Right, because it goes back into the plan. There was a targeted date.
It should just say final. I know.
Yeah.
Okay,
It really shouldn't say target, you're right.
okay.
But June 21 was a target. That was the target we set in June. That wasn't the actual June number.
Right.
Okay, okay,
Right.
By the end of June 21.
Right.
right,
That last column should better be labeled as just final data.
Yep, we got it.
Yeah.
got it. Thank you.
You're,
And I just want to pause on this, using this as the example of the first slide. So in this, you'll notice this is very factual data
Right.
that we pulled from attendance. We're not getting into tonight, like, what are the root causes of this? What are some things that we tried to make this better? What are things that we're working on for next year? And the reason we're not getting into that tonight is because next week, we have a 2-day workshop for school improvement and data review with our building level teams and our administrative team to really dig into this data and do that next level work of what are the root causes? What was going on in middle school that actually allowed us to achieve and really get that number down? That's a really great conversation to have. And then what's happening in the other two buildings? So again, we're not getting into all those deeper layers tonight. This was meant just as like, here are the absolute facts that we now know because 2021 has ended. And if you you have questions, by all means, and we'll gather those questions, and this conversation will continue into the July board meeting, but tonight's purpose was some of this high-level, just factual data.
Todd, just a quick question. How were COVID quarantines captured? So if someone was quarantined, they were virtual, and as long as they signed on and everything else, they were present?
Correct.
Okay, fine, all right.
All right. Nope. And then just the last snapshot area would be discipline. And this is a breakdown between the middle and high school from 17-18 school year all the way to the 2021 school year. And if you notice that the rates of referrals had significantly decreased for middle school and high school this year. All right. Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Hash.
Going to dig into that too next week, because that's probably an anomaly based on what we went through this year.
Yeah.
Don't rest on that laurel.
Okay. But it's interesting to see that level of decrease.
It's amazing to see that, no matter what the cause.
We did still have kids on campus every single day.
Yep.
Some remote exceptions, but kids were still here throughout the year.
But half the density.
Do we capture it at the elementary?
Good question. So elementary school, we are not as good about using school tool as the ultimate data collection source.
Okay,
Middle school and high school, we have great systems in place that it is all in there. We can run reports, it's easily categorized, and we can look at it in a nice clean snapshot. Elementary school takes more effort and is the short answer.
could we encourage them to use school tool? Can we encourage people to use school tool so we can track it? I'll let you have those conversations.
And part of that's the nature of discipline at the elementary school. Sometimes students stop by for little quick check-ins and reminders from the principal. So kind of figuring out and they started this conversation at the beginning of this year. What is the responsibility of the office? What is the responsibility of the classroom? So that's a great foundation for this next set of comments about now we're logging this all into the system so we can,
Okay,
look at the data better.
thank you.
And just add a little context, if you look in the building profile, there is a section from school tool on discipline from elementary school. The large majority of that, if you look at where it happens, is transportation. The reason, because transportation consistently uses that as a communication tool for any concerns on the bus from transportation
Oh,
to
okay.
the elementary office. So there is a consistent process in place for that, but it's very much transportation bus to the office.
Okay.
All right, shifting gears from demographic to some of our student learning data, starting with the elementary school.
So we had talked previously about ESGI, and that's the program that we use at kindergarten and first grade. So we want to provide you just kind of a glimpse of what those reports would look like. This report is, I just want to pull a couple of the different subtests that we use with our kindergarten, just so you can get a glimpse. This would be something that a principal could certainly look at. You're looking at the pie chart. Some of the information to understand from this is the totals in the pie chart are from the total number of questions asked. So it's not by students, it's just the total number of questions asked. So you can kind of look at this and say, okay, we can see some improvement throughout the year in these subtests. Where this program is the most powerful is at the teacher level. So when they look at this pie chart, they can break it down by student, and they can really see that student or two students who are struggling with uppercase and lowercase letter IDs, for instance. From that report, they can generate flashcards, letters to send home, so a parent could work on just those letters that the student missed. They could also print out a set of those flashcards for in-school support so that the teacher or support within the room can progress monitor a student along the way. So kind of a really helpful program, but I know you had been asking about these reports. Again, teachers regularly use these individual reports to identify specific skill gaps and make sure that the intervention, the support is really targeted on, here are the letters you're struggling with, here are the numbers you specifically are struggling with to get them up to, which hopefully all will have fluency with each of those skills. If they don't, our AIS team definitely steps in and can help support the teacher because this information can be shared with both groups. The next set of reports are going to be our iReady reports. What you'll see on each slide is a side-by-side. For you guys, on the left-hand side of the screen, it is percentage of students that are on grade level at the end of the year as compared with our last year where we have end of the year data, which is 18-19. On the right-hand side of the screen is typical growth, again, compared to the 18-19. You will see on the left-hand side of the screen, first grade appears. We segue our first graders into iReady at the end of the year, usually because they've all mastered those ESGI skills. If they did not, our AIS team meets with those students to make sure, to see where they are at with those foundational skills. But they won't have a typical growth score because they're not growing from anything. It also gives our first graders a chance to learn about iReady, practice using it, so then when they get into second grade, they have that familiarity, and we're hopeful that the results are a little bit more accurate than learning a system and trying to get data from them. Yes. Yep.
So I'm just reading the legend, and it says 18, 19, and 2021.
Correct.
Was there a reason for skipping 19, 20?
COVID.
COVID.
We're still in COVID now.
Correct. So we were completely off-site at that time last year. So this is a program that we were working with students on. So that's why the gap appears. Yeah. This year we were able to, even with our remote students were able to take it from home. Just, I think the timing, our understanding of how we could reliably have students at home go through the iReady test was still in its infancy stages.
Thank you.
I have a question also. This is really just, question is helping me to understand what we're seeing here.
Correct. Yep.
So on the right side, looking at fifth grade, for example, it looks like the red bar, 2021, there was an improvement in typical growth. And typical growth, if I remember correctly, is just it's a percentage, going from here to there and what the magnitude of that change is, right?
Yes.
But on the left side, looking at fifth grade, percent of students on grade level end of year, significant decrease.
Yes.
So how do you interpret that? I mean, there's good improvement, but the overall performance seems to be going down. Like, what should our takeaway be from data like that?
Right. So what we are presented with when we're looking at typical growth is from wherever a student started, there's a projected amount of growth of learning gains that should happen within a year, kind of a little bit separate from on-grade level results. So from where that student started, they should make this amount of progress within a year. So if a student starts behind grade level, they can still make typical growth, but not yet be on grade level. So we're seeing good growth gains, but still catching up and still trying to close the gap to being on grade level.
Okay, thank you.
So one last question. Since I'm looking at the tests over 2 years,
Yes.
I'm looking at grade 3, and then the same cohort would be grade 5 in red?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. That's a good way to read it. So a couple things are on grade level when compared to that 18-19 school year. We have 1 increase, 1 no change, and 2 decrease. For our typical growth, we're seeing 2 increase and 2 decrease. While third grade did not show the same greater levels of typical growth, they did show similar on-grade numbers to the 18-19 school year. So on our next slide is the math portion of the iReady assessment. So similar to what we just talked about, our on-grade level results, we had 1 increase and 4 grades decrease. In regards to our typical growth, we had 3 grades increase and 1 grade decrease. And the majority of grades did show a lower on-grade level rate when compared to the 18-19 school year, with the exception of grade 2. Majority of grade levels did see an increase in typical growth when compared to 18-19, with the exception of grade 4.
Dan, question. Since at the elementary school, we don't necessarily have summer school, and typically we've seen like a 20% loss over the summer, then we have potentially a cohort that could be going into 6th grade at a 5th grade level. So I don't know if there's still room to put some 5th graders into middle school since they're rising 6th graders. I mean, I don't know, is perhaps something to think about.
Well, the 5th graders were included in the elementary. They were not left out, so they were invited, so whatever parents accepted, those students are coming to the elementary program.
So a 5th grader would be in the elementary?
Right, is what
Okay.
we did this year.
Okay.
And then kept 6th, 7th, and 8th grade to work with those students before they move up.
Okay.
And again, something for us to kind of think about as we're digging deep into the data, projecting into the fall of saying, what are some of those, because Tammy has regularly said, we're looking for any kind of additional supports. We want the doors to be open to ideas for how to support our students. So these could be ideas for more fall supports for students where we can begin to target some of those skills.
Okay, thank you.
So the next slide, Todd's going to talk about a little bit. It has to do with Reflex Math, and this is showing some of the foundational skills with math.
So Reflex Math, you may remember that term from budget season because we talked about increasing a certain budget line software for the purpose of getting Reflex and using it consistently starting in grade 2 through 5. So what Reflex is, it's a math fact fluency tool. We've always had different tools that teachers use at the elementary school to practice and assess fact fluency, and what I mean by that is your times tables, 4 times 3, 8 times 2. So the first one for grade 2 where it says add, subtract 0 to 10, it's all the ways you can add and subtract 0 to 10. The difference this past year was after several teachers tried Reflex for, 2 years ago and really liked it and saw some good results and had some consistency in their classroom, we got to a point this past year where we use this consistently in every classroom, grades 2 through 5. What's the advantage of that? One, it's a pretty slick program and kids tend to like it. And two, it's a consistent tool that gives us really nice data overall for grades 2 through 5. So now, as opposed to in the past where it was trying to pull these different pieces together to figure out where are we with math fact fluency, we now have this tool that is being used well and gives us good information. So what we pulled is just one snapshot of, at each grade level, the fact fluency skills that they work on in that grade level. The left hand, the orange color, is where they started at the beginning of the year, so September into October. So for example, grade 2, 13% of the students had met their fluency skills already at the very start of the year. By the end of the year, on here it says current fluency, that was as of last week, so the end of the school year, almost 74% of second graders had mastered those fact fluency. And then it just goes across to grade 3, grade 4, grade 5. So again, the nice thing here is a consistent tool that gives us nice data to use. And bonus is that it's well liked by kids, it's gamified, it's fun to do your math facts on this tool. One note, grade 3, when you see grade 3 and it's the lowest of the ones on this screen, part of that is grade 3 starts with those starts with the add, subtract, and then shifts to the multiply, divide. So it's the second half of the year that they're working on that. So yes, that number is lower, but it's still obviously going in the right direction from where they started out earlier in the year.
Was the 8-6 consistent? Was that the beginning of the year when it was still add, subtract, or was that the beginning of the second semester?
Good question. That's when they would have started, when they shifted to it, so probably halfway through the year, depending
Yeah,
on when the teacher got to it.
It's consistent with the right.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. So that's Reflex. It's a good tool that we were able to start using this year, and again, gives us some nice data to look at. Back to Dan.
So as we shift into the middle school data, a couple things that Todd said are really important about the kids enjoy doing this and the gamification aspect. If you remember back to the ESGI pie charts you saw, those actually come up for an individual student as they're taking the assessment, their individual pie chart. And initially when we adopted the program, we were really hesitant to show them their scores. We had a screen set up for the student, a screen set up for the teacher. The student would just see the prompt and be able to say the letter or the number. When they did see the pie charts eventually, and I don't know if it just happened by happenstance or a student was nearby, they really got excited about seeing the pie chart grow over time. So that speaks to Reflex, that speaks to ESGI, and it also speaks to what they're doing at the middle school. And Brian's been working a lot with teachers and talking about how do you have conversations about your data? How do you share these results with students, and how do we push them to want to do better? And they've been working a lot at this, the middle school. We're bringing that down to the elementary school as well, because these conversations are really powerful in the fact that students are asking for their iReady assessment to be reset so that they can challenge it again to hopefully do better. Students are requesting that happens, all based on the conversations that they're having with the teachers. You can do better. I know this isn't representative of who you are. I think you can challenge this. And so students are taking this on. So as we segue into this middle school data, you can begin to see potentially what some of that impact is. So as we start looking at the middle school reading data, we're finding that for on-grade level students, we had 2 increase and 1 decrease. For our typical growth, we're seeing 2 increase and 1 decrease. So while some of our on-grade numbers might be lower than previous end-of-year results, we did not see this major drop-off despite changes in learning. Again, the middle school hybrid model for a lot of our students. We did see increased levels of students making typical growth and even stretch growth to work to close the gaps.
I have a couple questions.
Yep.
So again, like given that it's a tier gap from blue to red, if you're looking, for example, at, let's see, the left-hand column, 7th grade, the red this year, for comparison, would you actually look back on the last page to 5th grade?
To 5th grade, correct, yeah.
Right. Okay. And then, so here, like, let's see, 8th grade, I mean, pick a grade, I guess it doesn't matter, like 8th grade, what you see now is 56% as of, you know, whatever the data is through, are on grade level. For the other 44%, what grade level are they reading at? What's the distribution of grade levels among the 44%? I mean, the same question would apply for, you know, I guess, reading and math for all of these columns.
They're anywhere from 1 to 2 or more grade levels behind. So all of those, and we can, you know, we can pull out all those individual tiers for this data as well, but we really just tried to group anybody that was on grade level, and the one, usually it breaks it down to the yellow group is 1 grade level below, and then the red group is 2 or more grade levels below.
And one of the things too with that 8th grade data is there's about 22 kids who are in algebra that are not in those iReady scores because of them being in algebra. So, so you don't have the full 8th grade represented there.
Okay. For how difficult would it be, or by difficult I mean how much work would it be to pull out that data so we have some understanding of that distribution of the rest of those columns?
Yeah. So some of that is in your, a little bit, below grade level.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Is in
Your
some of
thought.
Is in some of the SEPs and the DSEP. Some of it will be listed as students below grade level. So that can be found in some of the data that you have currently. What we did also notice before Todd corrects me is that we also did.
Going to reinforce.
We also did reduce consistently our tier 3 group, which are 2 or more below, and bring them into that tier 1 or tier 2 group. So we did reduce the most struggling students as well.
Good. Good. I think it'd just be good to know if that distribution, again, of looking at the one, that 44%, you know, hopefully it's the largest part is hopefully just 1 grade level behind and then a smaller group of 2, et cetera, as opposed to most of the 44%, you know, significantly lagging behind grade level.
Yeah, and one of the things we've noticed a lot more, and I think we've talked about that already before, is that I think we just finished our 3rd year using the program, is how more comfortable the teachers are at using it too, and how teams are actually pulling up the reports, looking at it, and breaking it down before the start of the school year, and taking that into the school year to already get to know some of the students that they have coming in September. So, I mean, I know some teams have already submitted for coming in this summer to take on some of that work. So that has been a big thing too, I think, is just how people have become more comfortable using the reports and really breaking it down with the students. So.
Okay, thank you.
So I'll just add one other piece. If the board remembers back in January when we gave a mid-year update and pulled out some of these similar graphs for iReady, because the thing with iReady is you can truly look at 1,000 different graphs. I'm probably not even exaggerating, of the different ways you want to look at the data. We pulled out some for summary purposes, but if you remember back in January, we also then shared spreadsheets that you can dig into various different areas. So we updated those spreadsheets for the purpose of creating these, but we have those further breakdowns that we can certainly share when we have them organized. So provides the more detailed look.
Todd, I think in January there was some discussion about potentially purchasing software that would allow us to track longitudinally different students. Have we purchased that, or is it in the plans? Because we could see, all right, student A, 3rd grade was below 2 grades. I'm making this stuff up. But then by the 5th grade, it was 1 grade, and by the 6th grade, it was half a grade. So we could kind of see that.
Yeah, so if you're thinking of the software, we mentioned Intervention Compass. The idea is you track, it's all of the data that's in there, but the purpose of it is just what you said, to track individual students. So you can actually see over time how a student is progressing, or subgroups. So you can pull out just special ed students to see how they're performing over time. We are still in the process of trying to get all the pieces of data into that program.
Okay.
So it's a
Work in
side
progress.
project that is ongoing, let's put it that way.
So the answer to the question was, yes, you did purchase it, you're loading the data in.
Correct, yes. And we'll continue to load data in. It's been
Two
a
different
process.
vendors? Two different vendors?
That program, Intervention Compass, is one vendor. Their pitch that we are trying to make come to life is pulling, so iReady data, ESGI, Reflex, course grades, 3 through 8 assessments. Currently, all those pieces I just mentioned all exist in different locations.
But they don't give you automatic or APIs?
Some do.
Okay.
Some don't play as nice together, if
Okay.
that makes sense. So that some do, and it just automatically
No, I'm
integrates and
just
it's there.
wondering if the guy or the gal who is the spokesman for that is pushing it as something where it allows you to aggregate the data from these different things. They should be working on APIs that would allow that to happen. Okay? It's nice to say, well, you can take this, this, and this, but if you have to rekey it and do all that,
Correct.
that ain't so nice.
Correct. So yes,
Hold their feet to the fire. Let them do it.
Scott, wanna?
Yeah, I was just going to
You're gonna add?
that is what takes a little bit of time, because we are pushing them to make it automated. So
Well, it's a good,
developing an API between two different vendors takes a little bit of time, and so that's,
yeah, but it's good for them too. If they got a good product and they do it, it's good for them.
yeah. But that's part of the reason for the part we're still working through it, right? Because we don't want to be keying data in all the time.
No?
Right. To be continued.
And our final piece of iReady data is the middle school math information. So again, we have on grade level 2 grades increased when compared to 18-19, 1 grade level decrease, but in our typical growth, we found that all grades have increased in their percentage of students making typical growth.
So the next slide here looks at middle school total course failures, as you can see for the quarters throughout the year. The one reason why there's not anything for quarter 4 from the 2019-2020 school year, if you remember, for the fourth quarter last year, we had complete in working towards or incomplete. One of the things to keep in mind here is that these are individual course failures, and a single student could represent a number of these in each figure. All right, so something to keep in mind too. This is something we definitely need to dig into deeper next week with our BLT. I think, in the year that we've been in, that we can probably understand why maybe there's been some increases, especially with students learning from home. Very similar at the high school level here. Again, the numbers did increase across there, so you definitely see a pattern between both middle school and high school with this. And again, please keep in mind that, individual course failures could be one student who might have 3 or 4 courses that add up to a number in a quarter there. The next piece we wanted to look at a little bit is our annual perception survey. This year was our 6th year using this survey, the same survey to gather data from our students, our faculty, and parents. If you remember, our students, faculty, and parents basically rate a series of statements on a scale of 1, strongly disagree, to 5, strongly agree. And then there's also 2 open-ended response questions they can respond to. And we do take a hard look at that data each year. Our BLTs, again, we're meeting next week. We take a look at this. If you remember in some of our SEP goals this year, we actually took some stuff, and the DSEP goals, some of the perception data where we had low scores on, and actually created initiatives towards those, and we saw some growth this year with that. If you take a look at this is just a quick glance at this year's data. So you can see some of the strengths that our students, parents, and faculty pointed out, and then you can see some of the challenges there too that were brought up by, again, students, faculty, and parents. And with the challenges, just looking at it real quickly, most of those challenges fell kind of in the high, like around 2.7 to around 3.3. So there really was none of those challenges that were a 1, strongly disagree, which is good, but those are the areas that we tend to focus on and see if we can keep improving. The next slide there. So, as you know, this past year, the middle school, we were identified with one subgroup of
Can I go back to
Yes.
this cumulative data here, or this summary, represents the, when was this completed? Just before school ended last month?
This was completed March, April. All right, and then we got the data back end of May, so.
More
So it was
April to
toward
May,
the end
but
of
yes.
the year. It wasn't at the
Correct.
beginning of the year, it's toward the end of the year.
Correct, yes, yep. And again, these are just a couple of the quick points that I pulled out that seemed to be, high-level strengths or a kind of a lower-level challenge. The next piece of data there is, so as I said, we were identified this past year with our one subgroup in the middle school as a school in need there, and we had to, going forward next year, we have to create a plan again for the state. And one of the pieces, again, is to talk to a group of students. So this spring, before students left here in May, we didn't grab just a small group of students. We talked to every student. And we used Jen Bachant, who's worked with the district here for this past year. And she was able to go into each grade level, into a small class, and gather information, ask us some questions to our students, who in person and our remote students. So all students were able to participate in this. And, again, this is data we will use to build our plan for next year. So again, looking at some of the data from our students. And you can see just some of the quick responses from each of the grade levels, so you can kind of understand. I don't have the questions in front of me exactly, but one of the themes was they love the school days. They're out of the ordinary when they get to socialize. So again, in the year we've been in, that is an answer you might expect from students. The idea of if they've been home for 2 days or they are fully remote. So again, if you take a look at some of the students, there's the one from grade 7 about using paper and computer-based. So this is really good data right from our students that we're going to be able to take a look at and use going forward. And again, and it was something we had to do also to help shape our plan, but it was just very interesting. I think, we have to continue to keep making sure we're really listening to our students.
So just to add another note on that, so because I talked to Dr. Jen Bachant, who did this for us, she did a debrief with us as a cabinet, and she spoke to, and it doesn't show up on here, but just she was impressed with how well she felt our students did at being open and being honest about the positive things and things that they appreciated and enjoyed. It's like in 7th grade, this came up in all 3, but it was strongest at 7th grade. Many students want teachers to know they appreciate their compassion and efforts this year. Jen walked away with a feeling of like, oh my gosh, your kids are really appreciative of the work that adults have done for them, and they recognize that.
That's nice.
I think that's pretty incredible for a bunch of middle schoolers to be able to say that, and that's coming through. And then the other piece was the discussion that she saw happen between students and the teachers that were supporting them, so I think that's just good. It doesn't necessarily show up in here, but she walked away feeling like some things are going really well, and you have really great kids and great teachers that are able to express concerns and have dialogue, so it's a nice thing to hear from somewhat of an outsider doing some work for us, helping us in this area.
So I agree. It's nice to hear that the students appreciate that. So thank you for highlighting that. And Brenna, I missed it earlier. Did you say that the focus groups were entire classes, or is there a
Yes. So every grade level, she went into, like in 6th grade, went into all the social studies classes. So she worked for about 20 minutes with our students that were in person, and then she went out of the classroom and came down to the conference room and then met with all the students that were either home, hybrid remote, or fully remote. And she did that for all 3 grade levels. So really, yeah, it was great. It was pretty much every middle school, so unless they just didn't log in or come to school that day. So yeah, really, yeah, the full middle school.
I have a question for either Brian or maybe Dan, since Matt's not here. On this course failure for the high school, I'm assuming on the line that's 2021, it's possible that that could be an example, one student failing a course throughout the year. So they would get a score throughout. Is there an uptick in the number of kids that aren't going to move on, 9th to 10th, do you know? Or is there a number of students that did not graduate because of this increase? Because I'm assuming that many of them had, in previous years, had the opportunity to pull it out at the end.
So while I don't have that hard information, looking at this, it would tell me that there's at least probably more students who have not gone into the next course level. In regards to graduation, I don't have that exact figure, but I know over the last month, the way that the counselors and the principal and every teacher was working, especially with that senior class, to make sure that they had all their requirements in, to make sure that they were chased around to get them to cross that stage.
Yeah.
Kids that were here with us in person, kids that were with us remote, kids that had disappeared for 2 years and just popped up. They were working with every single one of those kids to try to get them to cross the
I mean, and also, if you look at quarter 2 to quarter 3, by quarter, end of quarter 2, we were really pushing and pulling a lot of kids back in every day. I mean, it's from quarter 2 to quarter 3, you see 100, you know, a drop of 100 right there of courses. So I think that was a big effort of we started looking at trying to get more kids in here. Again, we're not trying to dig too deep right now, but I can give you just a quick example too of, like, for example, there was more students failing PE this year. A lot of that being because if they were hybrid, kids on remote days not checking in to PE, just not logging in. So there were some classes that kids, although they were here in attendance for the day and went to 7 of their, you know, 7, 8 of their 9 classes, they may have skipped PE for that day because it was in just, you know, so those are some things we've got to dive into more next week, because some of those courses are courses in a typical year, and we said it earlier, are just probably wouldn't be there. So I think it'll be interesting to take a little bit more look at that breakdown.
Yeah.
I would also add to that a significant number of kids have signed up for the Apex this summer, which is the credit recovery for a lot of these classes. So if they successfully pass that, then they will have the credit for that class.
More than in previous years?
More than in
So that would
previous years.
indicate that, okay,
Yes.
thank you.
And I was told no student did not graduate when I asked.
No student.
All students graduated.
Students knew at the end of the year what courses they need to graduate. Right. So they were able to focus their attention. If they were limited in the attention they were willing to use, they were able to focus on those classes that they needed to get across the
That's
stage.
typical, though.
It is.
Not COVID related.
No.
Yeah. So one last thing, as far as the courses failed in the future, I mean, if these are the numbers for Shen, they're fantastic. For the number of students that are in the school, could we get a number of courses taken, or so we have a relationship to how many students?
Number of students that impact those courses, you mean, or number of, I guess I'm just.
Well, the actual number of courses.
I mean, it's like.
One student per one course.
So in the building profile, a lot of this is broken down with more detail. On the page that has this, it also breaks it down by quarter and by grade level, how many students that number represents. So for example, 12th grade, 3rd quarter, there were 12 students. To Tammy's point, of all those students graduated, they either, one, failed a course that they didn't need for graduation, because like Dan said, they focused their emphasis where it needed to be, or they were able to get the courses done that they needed. So that might give you a little bit more information. Or are you asking for something different? I just want to make sure I understand
When I
what
look
you're
at a
asking.
slide, I'm a little simple, and I just want to see it together.
He's looking for a numerator and a denominator,
I gotcha, okay. Thank you.
right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Or, right, if you had 100
Yeah.
kids,
Right.
and those kids take 7
7
classes.
courses. Yeah.
So, you know, and then times that by 4, so.
Yeah.
I got it. Thank you. I can do that. All right, so back to this image, because we use this frequently, this idea of demographic data, student learning data, and the perception data. Tonight, again, I've said this a couple times, by no means was an all-inclusive every single piece of information, but pulling highlights out for each of these areas of data and touching on them. The building profiles do have more information in all these areas. I encourage the board to look at that. If you have questions, write them down, bring them next month, send them to us in advance. We will be next week, as we mentioned, 7th and 8th, having that data workshop and then spending time as an admin team doing more work in developing the plans for next year. But just wanted to end this portion with this idea of those 3 different categories of data. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Wickham to give an
Todd?
athletics up. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Before we switch over, in looking at the Regents information, when you pull it out, can you add in, you have pass and then mastery, can you add in a third category of 75, pass with a 75? Because students who do not achieve a 75 in ELA or math have to go into remedial once they're in college. They have to pay college tuition, and they don't get credits. So if one of our goals is for students to be college ready, then not having that 75 pass, it could be an issue. So I'd just like to look at the numbers.
What test is that on?
Any Regents.
Yeah, but
Definitely reading and math are the two big, with the ELA and the math when they come in. You know, large percentage of students have to go into remedial, and
I understand that.
yeah.
But, I mean, you're saying that a kid went to Tennessee for college?
No, it's only New York. It's only a SUNY New York.
I was,
But I think a large percentage of our students do end up in SUNY schools.
Yes, I can include that.
Quick comment. First, the packet looks great. I think there's a lot of information here I'm looking forward to digging into. I appreciate, where you point out the color coding. I think that's really helpful. I know you said
All about color coding.
It was. It definitely makes it easier to follow. I know you said some of the data in here, I believe, was just collected, maybe hot off the press as of today. I think for the next time we get a packet like this, to the extent possible, if we can get in advance of the meeting, it would be, I'd like to be able to look at this before so I can come in prepared, like if I have questions, to do that. I understand, like you said, whatever questions you might have now, we can bring next month, and that's fine. But just, if next time we could get in advance, I'd appreciate that.
Yes, so the links, actually I just sent it to you, Daphne, if you can send it to the board. There's links, each of these documents, as we update them, you can see them being updated in real time. So if you use the links to access them, like actually this week, I guarantee I'll be adding more stuff in there to update them. It'll be there in real time.
Okay.
So yes, absolutely. As much as we get and we can share early, we will. A lot of this truly was, we used some time with our Questar folks to actually gather some of this, so that was a lot of back and forth just last week, and I'm working Dan to the last minute that he is a Greenville employee, so he helped me on Friday and today, so, but yes, as much as we can.
I understand that, maybe that it wasn't feasible this time because of everything coming together at the end. I get that. It is pretty neat, though, that you have the links where we can just click and see, what's the real-time status. So, excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think one of the things might be we arbitrarily said we wanted to do the last meeting in June in order to have this. So I would question, or I would ask you, throw it back to us and question, is this the most efficient time of presentation? Should it be in July? We don't know. This is the first time we're doing it. And if there's a more efficient way that's going to give you the time, necessary, then please ask for it.
Yeah, I think your point is a good one of this is the first time doing it in this structured format. We have to live through the whole experience. I do think that this is going to work out the best, but
Okay.
we will certainly reflect on it as an admin team later this summer too of did we get to where we needed to be and did it work? So
Okay.
thank you. Anything else before we shift? All right, Ms. Denise, it's all about athletics now.
That's my statement. So thank you. I do have a lot to share. As you remember, we started out the school year not really knowing if we were going to have athletics this school year. And everything kind of got pushed back 2 to 3 weeks because of the pandemic. So we started our fall season actually 3 weeks later than we generally would. So most of our seasons this year were very condensed. I would say that our winter season was the most condensed. And as I go through some things, I'll let you guys know a little bit of information about that. This year we had, and I would say these numbers are down as well. We had some athletes that decided not to participate. Some that were fully remote decided not to. Varsity athletes, we had 129 varsity athletes this year. JV, we had 60 athletes. 32 of those are duplicates, which means that some of those JV athletes were also varsity athletes, okay? So they fell into two categories. Modified athletes, we had 79 modified athletes, which is 7th and 8th graders, and we only had 2 duplicates in that. Athletic placement process. In the fall, we had 5 athletes, 5 8th graders that moved up to JV or varsity level. During the winter season, we had 2. Fall 2, we had none. And spring season, we had 5 athletes. So this year, because again of the pandemic and low numbers, we didn't have any JV softball team. We've been struggling in those numbers for the last 4 years, though. We did not have a boys modified volleyball. However, we did have a practice team. So when I say we didn't have it, they were just practicing to get their skills up so that they could participate next year. And we had 6 kids in that. Modified wrestling, we only had 2 students that signed up this year for modified wrestling, so we did not run that season. All conference selections. So our kids came out on fire in the fall. I mean, and I can't even say anything less than that. They were on fire. They were so excited, I think, just to be out, be moving, be with each other. It was wonderful. We had 5 Patron Conference MVPs, and again, that's a huge honor for any of our kids in the Patron Conference, because they're voted on by the coaches as the best athlete in that sport. So all of those came from our fall season. James Mitchell in soccer, Tess Fitzmaurice in cross country, Ryan Russell, cross country, Bryn Fitzmaurice in girls tennis, and Trey Smith in golf. And Trey has held that honor for, I think, the last 3 years. So he continues. Fall and fall 2, we had 25 athletes, minus those 5 MVPs. That means we had 20 other athletes that were honored on either first team or second team, all conference. And in the spring, we had 18 athletes. You'll notice there, but there is no winter, because during the winter season, we had 3 weeks of what I say was a game every single night, right? 3 weeks we were going really hard, but we didn't play all conference teams. That was a time where we were still trying to figure out whether, you know, what it was going to be like with the pandemic indoors versus outdoors, safety and so forth. And I will say, before I go on any further with this, that our coaching staff this year really, they stepped it up. They did screenings, they did extra stuff, safety protocols, cleaning. So all of those things to try to keep athletes safe and for us to be able to proceed through with the season. They did a wonderful job this year. So again, we didn't have any winter all-conference, or we would have been adding to this list, because there's definitely kids that were worthy of that honor. I put in there your all-conference list in your packet. And just quickly going down, boys soccer, Isaiah Edmonds, first team, Ben Reinhard, first team, second team, Jack Mata and Peyton Gergen and Liam Bowden. Girls soccer, Isabel Trossel, Ella Gruppi, and Emma Haller, all first team. And Jessica Lamanda and Ella Mulholland were second team. Cross country, we had Melody Capel, who was first team, Jessica Wank, that was second team. And boys cross country, Finn Kosic, Gavin Metcalf, first team, Thomas Bauman, second team. And again, all of these kids, you're going to hear more and more about these kids, because they're pretty young, most of these ones. Golf, Ryan Arp was also honored on the first team. Girls volleyball, we had Cassidy Augustine, first team, Lauren Roth and Tess Herwick were second team. This was a fall season too, but I'm going to put them in the fall because that's when they should have been. But girls tennis, we had Lauren Roth, first team. And in the spring season, they continued. Ryan Russell, first team for boys track, Ryan Ravel and Finn Kosic for second team. In girls track, we had Tess Fitzmaurice, first team, Bryn Fitzmaurice, second team, Carolyn Cossage, second team, Ella Mulholland, and Emily Smith, second team, which is amazing to have that many athletes honored. Softball, Melody Capel and Emma Haller were first team. Second team, Molly Santamaterio and Madeline Prado, second team. Baseball, Joey Domermuth and Isaiah Edmonds, first team. And Cole Flannery, Jack Mata, second team. And in boys tennis, James Mitchell was first team and Miles Weiss was second team. So it's pretty amazing what our athletes can do. They continue athletically to just excel. And they were very excited to be able to play this year. Even the whole atmosphere changed in the school, I believe, when the winter season finally went off. All right, you could feel like there's just this energy that happened in the school district. That's that school spirit. So I wanted to talk to you. We had a college commitment day on June 17th, which was wonderful. 7 of our seniors are committed to play at the next level, which is the college level. Tess Fitzmaurice is going to the University at Albany, and she's going to be doing cross country and track for them. Melody Capel is going to be a bomber at Ithaca College, and she's going to be playing softball. Kaylee Burke is trying to decide between dance, kick line, and cheer. So whichever one she decides on, I'm sure she's going to be wonderful at it at SUNY Plattsburgh. James Mitchell is going to Bryan College, which is in Tennessee, and he's going to be playing soccer. And Ryan Russell is going to Union College, and again, cross country and track. Eli Larson is going to SUNY Canton, and he's going to be participating in basketball and baseball. And Damian Fiducia, he's going to the Massachusetts College of Liberal Arts. Well, we're not quite sure. He's still maybe down in Florida, but he's going to be playing basketball. So that's just amazing for our kids. This year we had Patron Conference champions, boys soccer, boys cross country, and boys tennis this year. Sectional champions. So in a year where we didn't have sectionals for the fall 2, winter, we still ended up with sectional champions in the spring. All right, Tess Fitzmaurice, again, amazing young athlete. She's 2-time, right, or 2 events, 3,000 meter, that should say, and this 2,000 meter steeplechase. And Ryan Ravel, in diving fashion, came across first in the 400 meter. He did dive to get that championship, but he did it. So we're really proud of them for their championships. Boys tennis, amazing. This was the first year since I've been here that we've had boys team sectionals. We've always had individuals where kids go off to individuals and they get thrown into this massive lot of, and then they just get drawn out. So you could end up, one of our kids could end up playing a kid from Bethlehem, a triple or a AA school. You just never knew. So this was the first year we actually played Ichabod Crane in the finals, and Jay knows, he was there. It came down to our 5th singles. So if anybody knows anything about tennis, you have 1 through 5 going at one time, and then you have a doubles. All right, we had 6, and then so they all start at the same time. So everything's going on, and our 5th singles is still playing. So it came down to that match, and he ended up losing that in the 3rd set 6-4. So it was an amazing, amazing thing. Patron medalist, golf, again, was Trey Smith. So that means he was the best in the Patron. And we had 3 school records that were set this year. Isaiah Edmonds, .606 season batting average, which that's amazing. That means he's on base a lot. And I would say he's probably got the most steals, too, because he's very quick. Tess Fitzmaurice, she has 2 records. Cross-country course record at 18:46 and the 2,000-meter steeplechase at 7:19.96. And Eli Larson, single game rebounds in basketball, 19. And then finally, which is all important because of what we were just discussing about academics. Academics are very important in athletics as well, and I think that kids who participate on athletic teams also do fairly well in their academics. Their coaches stay on them. They know that they're going to be held to a high standard. This year, scholar athlete teams for the fall, boys and girls cross country, golf, girls soccer, girls tennis. Fall 2, girls volleyball. Winter, girls basketball and boys volleyball. And spring, every single one of our teams, baseball, softball, boys tennis, boys and girls track and field. So not only do we have some exceptional athletes out on the field, courts, right, we also have exceptional student athletes. Yes, Jay?
First, I mean, it's impressive. It sounds like it was a phenomenal year.
It was.
You're really amazing, so it's exciting to hear. Thank you for the update. Scholar athletes, is there what makes a student a scholar athlete?
So there's
Aside from just the athletics part.
So it's when your team, 75% of your team can maintain a 90% or better average.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And I don't remember, do we recognize the individual scholar athlete?
Yes. Yeah, they get a pin and a certificate. Those kids that were 90% or better throughout the season.
Great. Could we get a list of them?
Sure.
I'm curious to know who they
Sure.
are. It sounds like an accomplishment, especially since the teams did so well.
Yep.
I mean, I shouldn't say especially, it's great regardless. But I'm glad that they're already recognized. I'm not surprised here that they were, but it's nice to actually know who they are too.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
Great job.
I'd like to thank the athletes and the coaches for proving me wrong. I voted not to have sports in August, a very tense meeting,
Yep.
but hindsight is 20/20. I mean, we've all learned a lot about COVID, so
Yep.
I'm not saying it would be different now, tonight, but I'm unbelievably proud of how they did.
Yeah, and in the fall, I mean, again, there's a lot of fear that was, because you fear, we were one of 2 conferences that actually did fall athletics, the Patron and the Suburban, and there was not a single incident in either one of those conferences, I don't believe. I'm not sure about the Suburban, but I'm pretty sure. I mean, we didn't have any in the Patron, so I'm very thankful for our coaches and the efforts that they did.
Well, if Dave can eat crow, I'll eat a little too, but it's got to put some Tabasco sauce on it.
You're a lord, so.
Yeah, thanks for that, Dave. I mean, me too. I'm glad I was proved wrong, or my concerns were unfounded, or at least
Well, I
it
think-
wasn't that it played out as well as it did, because I know it's good for the kids, and I'm glad to see how they responded and it was managed well. So.
And I think all the way through the school year, our kids have been troopers all the way through the school year, wearing the masks, I mean, doing everything that they've been asked to do. So we do have great kids here at Greenville.
Yeah, I would echo what Denise said. I mean, I think the kids, you laid out the expectations and they followed them. I mean, from walking in every room and grabbing a squirt of hand sanitizer. I mean, that was my fear last summer. Like, how's this going to work? And they rose to the occasion. So kudos to our kids.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of part 1 of reflection from the year and an overview of some of those different areas: academic, student learning, perception, and then also the athletics. Going back to the very start when I mentioned those 2 purposes of our share tonight, that was the first part. The second part is looking forward and thinking about the 21-22 school year. So recapping some information and then plans moving forward. So first, the middle school remains a targeted support and improvement school, or TSI school, specifically for our special ed subgroup. That will not change under the current ESSA accountability rules until we have state assessment data that shifts that. So obviously last year we did not have student or state assessment data that would shift that. This year, while there were 3 through 8 testing, it will not be used for accountability purposes. All that to say, we will continue to be a TSI school for the middle school next year. That also makes us, as a district, a target district. So in our planning, we have to have a district plan, that DSIP, and we have to have a building plan for the middle school. What we continue to maintain is using this having a commitment to using this process at all 3 buildings for all the reasons that we just shared tonight, of having this consistent process of looking at how we are doing and looking at putting together plans for improvement. So we continue to maintain that. There are updates to the process used by SED. So SED came out with new templates that we will use for the creation of next year's 21-22 DSIP, as well as the SEPs. So I want to just give a little bit of information of what are the main differences. So at the district level, District Comprehensive Improvement Plan, there is a shift in what the state has put out, and they have put an increased emphasis on alignment and connectedness, meaning all of our efforts as a district. There are so many things that we work on, right? Even just tonight in what we shared, you can hear about different programs, about different tools that we use. There's so many things that we are constantly working on as a district. What the state is urging us, which I think is a good thing, is when it comes to improvement efforts, as much as you can, align what the main areas of focus are and find connections between all of the different pieces, meaning the different buildings. That was true this past cycle, but there's an increased emphasis from the state to really think about how we connect all these different pieces. As part of that, under the previous DSIP, that district plan, we had to have 5 priorities. It was a requirement that we had to come up with 5 district level priorities of things that we were going to focus on. In this coming year, 21-22, they have shifted to say, if you align and find this connectedness and you end up with only 3 priorities and you really want to put your focus on those 3 priorities, then do it. You don't have to be forced to come up with 5, but we have the option to have between 3 and 5 priorities. At the building level, so School Comprehensive Education Plan, again, this one we are required to have one for the middle school because that's where we identified, but we are remaining committed to doing one for the elementary and also the high school. At the building level, there's an increased emphasis on school values and aspirations and less focus on initiatives. So what does that mean? My interpretation of this is in last year's template for the building, it was very structured and formatted around what's the initiative that you are going to start? What is something new that you have not done before that now you are going to do? While there's still value in that, the shift, and again, I think it's not a bad thing, it can be a good thing, is what are the things that you value most? Within each of your buildings, what are the things that you value the most, and what is it that you want to work on? So it could be something you're already working on, or we have already identified and we know we need to continue to work on it. It's not that we are creating new initiatives, it's also aligning the work that we're already doing and remaining committed to it. So at the building levels, previously, 2021, at the building level plan, it was very structured in the goals that we had to have. We had to have an ELA goal, we had to have a math goal, we had to have an attendance goal, and then we had a survey goal and an SEL goal. In the new plans for 21-22, there is a shift, and they're saying to come up with 2 to 4 commitments. So not necessarily goals, different words, kind of really mean the same thing, but really 2 to 4 commitments based on what are those things that you value the most in that building. So small tweaks, but I think there's important differences in the shift that the state has made in terms of the requirements that they are putting out for those schools, us being one of them that is identified. The other piece that I didn't include on this screen, but is part of this, just like this past year, there was improvement grant funds available for this work. We still have not received the exact amount or the process or how we get those funds. I'm looking at Erin just to verify, and she's agreeing with me. But they have said there will be money available to do this. So there's funds that go along with making the improvement planning come to life. So with that said, a piece of what we wanted to gather from the board was thinking about the highest level, those district priorities, and getting some of your thoughts and feedback as we go into next week's workshop. So the admin team next week will be working with teachers from across the district, the building level teams, and then some other teachers that were interested in participating in really digging deeper into this data and coming up with the draft of what our district plan will be for next year. This past year, if you remember, we have our 3 district goals that we've tweaked each year over the past 4 or 5 years, but the heart of those 3 goals remain the same. And they're up on the screen, but I don't expect you to read them. I'll summarize them because this is how I always think of them. Goal 1 is really the curriculum goal and what's happening in our classrooms every day. It's the curriculum piece. Goal 2 is the culture piece, tying it to our mission, making our school a place where everyone has a sense of belonging and they feel like they belong at Greenville schools. And then goal 3 is really the community piece. How do we outreach to parents? How do we make the community part of our educational system? So I think that's the easiest way of thinking about it. Curriculum, culture, and community. Those goals will remain, right? We continue to work on the actual individual plans around them, but those goals remain. Last year in the improvement plan, because we had to have 5 priorities, we came up with our priorities and kind of made our priorities fit into our district goals to try to create that alignment. As we started conversations as an admin team of looking at what do we have to do for next year, 21-22 district plan, what makes sense for priorities? The items that were listed as our priorities, and I'll just read them quickly: increase effective collaboration. Number 2, increase use of data to improve student learning. Number 3, increase critical thinking skills. Number 4, incorporate and support student social emotional learning. And number 5, reduce chronic absenteeism. Those all remain important areas that we will continue to work on. The question becomes, what truly becomes our priorities in the district plan? So one of our thoughts is actually trying to merge these to make it even more, again, this idea of connected and alignment. We have those 3 district goals. We can take those 3 district goals and they become our priorities. What the actual action steps look like, those things from last year, the building plans, they can all fit under them and work together, but trying to create, here's the consistent umbrella. There are goals or priorities. The state uses that word priorities, but we like to use our district goals. We've used that term consistently here at Greenville, but make them the same. They are the 3 main things that we continue to work on and have that be the umbrella for the district. So with that, I'm going to jump, let me do one more piece. So I want to get to the point where the board, if there are thoughts, because here's the next step in this process, or the next number of steps in the month of July. As we mentioned a couple of times, next week we have 2 dates, July 7th and 8th, that is a 2-day workshop. The main focus of that day is to come up with a draft of the district plan. The reason for that, it is due to New York State Education Department by July 31st. So we really have to have a strong draft by next week in order to get the other pieces in place to submit it. Next Friday, July 9th, our administrative team will take the information from that 2-day workshop and kind of digest all of it and try to figure out where do all these pieces fit together and further develop what our district plan is. The following week, we will be back again, take 2. So board meeting on July 12th is to go further with you as a board, giving you more information on here's what is solidifying as our district goals and our priorities. And here's the major themes from the discussions that we had with building level teams to have you have a better understanding of kind of step 2 in developing of these plans. And then the rest of that week, July 13, 14, that is our summer admin retreat where we get together and spend lots of quality time together. We will take all that again and further develop to get to a place where this becomes more of the solidified district plan. The reason I'm mentioning this is because, and this is the reason, to Tracy's point earlier, why we set up this calendar the way we did. The purpose of tonight was to share a lot of information and just a quick reflection on this past year and the initial, what are we thinking for 21-22? We, as an admin team, don't want to go too far in that planning. If you, as a board, feel like, whoa, you're missing this over here, it's not included anywhere, you need to make sure you include it, we want to hear that from you to make sure that that is woven into the work that we do next week and the week after, and then finalizing those plans before we have to submit them to the state. So that brings me to the last slide of questions, more info that you would like, or really that big piece as you sit here and think about it tonight, suggestions or ideas of priorities or something that has not been mentioned or included. And it might not have been mentioned, but we can fit it into one of those 3 goals if there is an emphasis on focusing on it, or if there's something that truly has not come up at all and we are just blind to it that we need to really think about and try to include. Yes.
So in looking at it, it ties in a little bit to the increased use of data to improve student learning. To me, the piece that's missing is that once we identify, let's say, the students that are struggling or whatever, then how are we supplementing via a modify is not the right word, the incremental curriculum or so forth in order to get them up to performing where they need to be? Does that make sense? I can give a specific.
I think I'm going to rephrase it. Do you mean in terms of like RTI structure, tier 2 interventions? Student is not being successful with core curriculum. We need to look at an intervention that's going to help support them. We move to tier 2, then tier 3?
Sort of, in a way.
Okay.
Like, let's say student showing deficiencies in math. Then we have math reflex. Is that sufficient? Or is there something in addition that is required? Because just to do the same thing more may be causing part of the problem. So as you go off and you develop that, that would be my question to you.
So I think that I would agree. That fits in with goal 1 in there in the data piece, but yes, absolutely.
We got a lot of special funds over the next couple of years. I think you need to take a really hard look as to whether we should have some remedial classes, especially in ELA and math, but in science too.
Okay.
Actually, to go along with that, not to cut you off, Jay, but with Duncan's point, I've been reading through other school districts, and in our last meeting, we had mentioned that we shouldn't be spending that money on ongoing items like hiring a person. But I see that several districts that I've read of have thought about hiring remedial people. And then just letting the people know that this is a temporary situation, hopefully just like COVID was, and we're going to get the students up to speed.
I'd really like to see your analysis of how well something like that would work and whether or not we can do it. We certainly, I don't know how we do it within the budget, but I guess since we didn't know when we made the budget we'd have that excess funds, we certainly could find a way to do it. If that's what you guys came up with, but I'd really like you to take a hard look at that, whether there'd be a bang for the buck.
So again, I think that connects, again, the idea of the tiered structure, right? Remedial support, I'll replace that term with students are not being successful, tier 1 with core instruction, tier 2, what interventions do we try? Tier 3 is that highest level that tends to require additional adult support in some form, right? What that looks like and what are the needs, different levels, different areas, but that structured system of what are we doing for RTI supports. So.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Tammy, isn't it a percentage of the federal funds supposed to be used for?
20%.
20%.
For learning loss.
Right, and it could be teacher coaches, which I'm hearing about.
Yep, that's one thing we're definitely looking at.
Or
Yep.
a direct person that's going to work with the students.
Yeah, Jay.
I think my comment, I think it's already baked in there, and it kind of floats around what everyone else is saying. But I mean, looking at the goal of increased use of data to improve learning, I'd like to see more explicitly kind of front and center. You're using the data now. I think there's a lot of data and comfort with it. Just focus on improved student learning. The math and reading at grade level, I'd really like to see, an explicit target, if possible, of, if at grade X, we're seeing grade level Y now, next year, let's try to do Y plus something, to focus on driving improvements so that we have a higher percentage, across the grades that are at grade level in those fundamental skills. And second, we talk a lot about the the remedial learning, trying to bring those students up, and understandably, like, you know, it's concerning, we need to put attention there. But I'd also like to hear how we're addressing the students maybe who are at grade level and challenging them, and also the students who are above grade level in math and reading, and what is the district doing to challenge them and to keep them interested and engaged? So.
Yep, the other end of the spectrum.
And the middle too, so that they're also challenged and, you know, getting something. Thank you.
Thank you.
To use an old statement, you know, a rising tide lifts all ships, that if we are going to be looking at bringing everybody's grades up and their performance up and so forth and their capability, if we do professional development, like you're saying, coach the coaches and so forth, if we can do development in that realm, then all the students will benefit from the improvement. And I know from my own world, I mean, I know everything because I'm just fantastic, but every day I still look for process improvement myself, and educating the educators so that they can then better educate would be a good thing.
Well said. I would agree.
I have another question, Todd.
Yeah.
Back on the changes, I guess, as you mentioned on the school improvement plan, a philosophical question is, what is your interpretation of them going from a goal to a commitment? I mean, where does that lie as far as accountability?
Good question, Mr. Finch. So the term just goal to commitments, they change on all the forms. Some of this is also coming from, I called and had conversations with state ed because I'm like, I need to better understand this. What is this really all about? So there was something that I liked about being forced into having ELA goal, math goal, right? It was very structured. I like structure, I like process, right? So it created that structure for us. I think what happens with that is people get so focused on those individual things that they lose sight of, like, what are we really trying to do, right? Because you can do all this work, but are like, oh my gosh, are kids just having a torturous time here? Not that that happened here, but I think that was some of the reflection. Again, this is me interpreting and some different conversations I had with state ed. So they turn it into more of this, really understand what you value as a school communities, because if you focus on what you value and get people to come together, you're going to see improvement. With that, my question is, even in the templates that we are filling out and submitting to the state, there is less structured quantitative data. This is where we're at, this is the target we're gonna set, and then where do we get to, right? I liked that about this past process because it was, again, structured and set a target for ourselves. We were striving for that, we knew what our measure was, and that's what we were trying to get to. There's less of that, to be honest, which in some ways takes away a little bit of the accountability feel, which I also, again, this is a lot of me interpreting things from reading state documents and talking to them, but my disclaimer, my interpretation. Took some of that out to try to get people to feel more invested in the process and not just, we're doing this to check a box. I think locally, we did, especially for the first year of being on this list, I think we did a good job of keeping the eye on the prize of, we are not doing this just to check the box because state ed told us to, right? We are truly making this a process where we can all learn and grow together. But I think they're trying to shift their state ed plans to make that more across the board. Does that kind of answer your question? But what you're asking is things that I've been thinking about, to be honest.
Right, but I'm wondering, while you were talking, I'm wondering if commitment is a softer term versus a hard goal. Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing is, I like the idea of less initiatives. I mean, throwing the bowl of spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks is ridiculous. But when it says values and aspirations, is that meaning we value our form of RTI and we're going to apply that and go stronger with that? Is that your interpretation of what they're thinking?
Yes, that can be an example of it, yep. I would say also, we don't have specific value statements as a district. We have our vision document that incorporates a lot of that in there in a different way. But some schools have very defined, we value that all students can learn. We value differentiating instruction to meet students where they're at. Those types of statements, again, we have done that in a little different way, and it's kind of incorporated into that vision. But when they say values, that's what they're referring to, those types of statements. You're welcome. But good question, because I've been thinking about it myself. Yes, Duncan?
I think the strategic decision you made last year as a group to focus on all three schools, not just the middle school, was a really solid one. And it's really the base for where we're going now.
Yep.
And I'd encourage you to make sure that we don't get just off to try to accomplish what we need to do to satisfy the TSI, but that we take this comprehensive view of the whole process.
Yep.
and don't lose sight of what we can gain from the whole thing. I think it was a great decision you guys made last year.
Thank you. Yeah. And to that point,
That's only because Dan's leaving, I just want to.
to that point, we also want to establish this as a process that we use when we're not identified by the state, right? School improvement is an important process. If we can learn from whatever template the state has us use each year and take pieces from previous work that we've done, but truly create, this is the Greenville process for school improvement, that's the more important part in all of this, so.
Do you have a feel for how many other districts took that kind of an approach?
I don't.
Okay,
I don't.
just a casual.
I know some that didn't. I will leave it at that.
Okay.
Yes, Eric.
So one last thought from my perspective. I mean, words have meanings. Like, what's the difference between ignorance and apathy? Well, I don't know and I don't care. So, along those lines, my father, many, many moons ago, explained the difference between making a contribution and a commitment by saying, for breakfast, you're having your breakfast and your eggs and bacon are a different form of food, but you're still eating it. But the chicken made a contribution and the bacon made a commitment. So when I read the commitment there, I mean, it has a different meaning. I mean,
Right.
so I think, I hear Todd has an interpretation. I think we should really find out what state ed means by their change in language, because it means something. They're words.
So state ed's answer to that, because I asked it, was that piece about values. Less focus on initiatives and more focus on values. What you value as a school was some of their direct language that they used with me.
So they're
Now-
getting softer?
In some of the language, but I mean, the other piece of this, if you look at the templates, and I can certainly share all this, and you'll see all of them eventually filled out for our plans, there's still a section, evidence, right? What's the evidence? If this is your commitment, what are your strategies? Well, I don't have that folder with me. What are your strategies? And then somewhere, what is your evidence? It's still all in there in some form. It's just a little bit of shift of, to your point, some of the language, but you do still have to have evidence.
Okay.
Again, previous language was, what's your baseline, what's your target, what's your final? That is very,
Right.
right? This
Okay.
is, make your commitment, what's your strategy, what's your evidence? Okay, we can still get that what we need to set goals and targets, but it's just going to be framed a little differently. I don't know if that helps.
So are they measurable? I mean, how do we know that we're off, other than they say we're off? Do we have to show a 10 percentage point increase among a certain subgroup? I mean, help me here.
So remember, the identification comes from our ESSA scores that go back to all the different metrics that are used for identification of ESSA in all the different categories, 1, 2, 3, or 4, right?
But I thought it was specifically special ed subcategory, lack of growth over whatever year. So that's kind of specific.
It is, but there's the true getting off of the list comes from the ESSA scores that come from state ed or state assessments, right? That's where it comes from.
Okay.
In our plan, so even this year, like I'll use the middle school because that's where I identified, we incorporated more I-ready because we didn't have state assessment data last year. We didn't know what was going to happen this year, but we wanted to have some type of metric, some type of measurement. we knew we're going to have iReady. To the best of our ability, we are going to have iReady data, so let's use that as our measure. We can meet every single target that we come up with for iReady. That in itself, under this current structure, who knows what it will be 2-3 years, because you can't predict, but the current structure, that doesn't get you off the list. What gets you off the list is state assessment data improving to a degree that you don't have ones.
Okay, so that's the goal then. Then we don't have any ones? Because there is a very strong correlation between iReady and state assessments. So the fact is, I feel like we're ahead of the game because we are using iReady. We are able to assess it 3 times a year. And so we can adjust and modify. So no ones, that's basically what we need?
We need fewer ones. You can still have some ones. You just can't have as many as we do in a certain area.
That's a pretty specific goal. So somewhere in that document or internally, that's what we should be working for.
Yes, that still needs to be the big goal.
We need that box.
Yes,
checked.
yes, 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 yes.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Any other thoughts, questions? Sure, go.
I forgot to mention this, and it was a big point I wanted to mention, but
Give me a
I'd
chance
like
to
to thank
shift.
the board and the community for the capital project. The amount of people that made comments about the facilities out back was amazing this season. And the kids thoroughly enjoyed it. I think they're going to, hopefully it's going to promote more athletes within our school district. And a big thank you to Buildings and Grounds and Rich and his crew. This is the best I think our facilities have looked in a number of years, and that's due to their commitment that they're making towards learning how to do all of these things. You know, all of it. It's truly amazing.
I'm good. Thank you very much. Good discussion. Good questions.
There's a lot of information. Thank you. That was a lot of hard work that you guys all pulled together really quickly. We recognize that. We thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I need a motion to accept the Committee on Special Education recommendations.
Tracy, Eric, thank you.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I need a motion to approve the finance reports for the month ending June 30th, which isn't here yet.
Tracy, Jay, thank you.
Any questions or discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I need a motion to approve the 21-22 Code of Conduct.
Eric, Tracy,
Any discussion on that?
Yes. I know a lot of effort goes into this, and the last time around, as I recall, Jay had said, I want some more time to review the red line and so forth. And this time when I went back through it and so forth, some of my confusion that was mentioned before as far as things changing and references and so forth, I don't know who owns the document, who's the editor. But I have an example of the stuff that confused me when I did it the first time and so forth, and I just want to give it to whoever's the document owner so they can clean it up or whatever.
take it from you. I can take it from you. I compared our last year's Word with this year's Word, and then did a comparison of the two documents, which then brought up the differences between the two.
This is just Eric process improvement. The example I have here is cyberbullying means harassment, bullying as defined above. Well, it's actually the first item in the definition, so the defined above is not reflective of, it's defined herein. So it's just language, it's just
Okay.
English.
Yeah, I'll take that from you when we're done.
But that
That
was
may
the
have-
part that was Bob.
That may have happened when they alphabetized it. That's probably what happened.
I think editorial changes can be made if there's no substantive change.
Right.
Okay.
No,
So-
just-
Okay.
Right, that's all just grammar, right?
Yep.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I need a motion to approve the personnel agenda.
Tracy, Need a second? Jay?
Any discussion on the personnel? All in favor?
Aye.
I just want to pause here. I introduced you to Christy right before, but since then, Matt also arrived. So Matt Berkshire is the new K-12 principal. So everyone can really introduce themselves after, but I wanted to acknowledge that he's come to the meeting tonight, too. So welcome, both of you.
Welcome. Okay. We got an okay on that?
Yeah, we're good, so we just go to 7.5.
I need a motion to appoint the election inspector for the 2022 annual vote and election.
Okay, Tracy and Eric.
Questions?
I just want to add that there will be more people added to this list. It's just early, and wait and see how next year, if it's a typical election, there will be more people added to this list.
All in favor?
Aye.
I need a motion to approve the agreement between the Greenville Central School District and Mid-State Industries LTD for the capital renovations of 2 elementary classrooms in the amount of $260,800.
Okay, Tracy and Jay, thank you.
Questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
I need a motion to approve the 2021 Health and Welfare Services contract between the Greenville Central School District and the City School District of Albany in the amount of $4,671.84.
Eric and Tracy, thank you.
Any question? All in favor?
Aye.
Dave?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I need a motion to approve the contract between the Greenville Central School District and Crossroads Center for Children's School Year from September 8th, 2021 through June 23rd, 2022, and the summer program from July 12th, 2021 through August 20th, 2021.
Eric, need a second? Jay, thank you.
Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
I need a motion to accept a donation to the Greenville Central School District presented by Greenville Central School District alumni on behalf of the Ron France Memorial Fund in the amount of $860.
Okay, Jay, I need a second. Duncan, thank you.
All in favor?
Well, I have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Do we know where it's going to go?
Their preference is near the baseball field, so it'll be a location over there.
Outside the batting cages, but that's okay. They'll put it where it should be.
Yeah,
Okay,
We just need to vote.
that's a good idea.
okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
I need a motion to approve an overnight field trip to Camp Oswegatchie.
Eric and Duncan?
Question? All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
I need a motion to approve surplus items, which are listed on your papers.
Okay, Tracy, I need a second. Eric, thank you.
Any question on those? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, Tammy, federal stimulus funds.
Okay, this one I hope to be quicker, nothing personal. But I did want to share the survey results with the board. So just as a quick reminder, we have 2 grant allocations. One's the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriation Act, and these dollar figures have changed slightly since we last met, and that's $990,850. Districts must obligate by September 30th, 2023. And if you remember, I discussed that we had asked for an extension, so our application is due July 15th. The ARP, the American Rescue Plan Act, this is where at least 20% must be used to address learning loss. This dollar amount is $2,689,232. We must obligate by September 30th, 2024, and this application is due August 13th. So at our last meeting, I reviewed different areas that we were looking at, and this was based on some initial feedback from internal stakeholder groups. And they included technology upgrades, facilities. We were looking at outdoor teaching, learning, and eating spaces, ventilation and air quality, and then under academics, we were looking at learning loss, we were looking at instructional coaches, after-school help, summer school, one-to-one tutoring, late buses. A lot of different items have fallen under that category. And we were looking at mental health and how we could support our students with their social, emotional needs. So we really took that format to put the survey together. But first, we wanted to review a little bit of criteria for developing our plans. We want to make sure that what we choose is aligned to our vision, aligned, obviously, to the allowable use of the federal stimulus funds. And consideration, does the proposal address a newly identified need that we're looking to take care of? Does it support and enhance an existing activity that we're working on that we already have in motion? Does it represent an innovative step forward? Is this something that we've wanted to do, that now we have the funds to it? And this is something that really Dave addressed a little bit, is can we sustain the expense when federal funds expire? And if not, is it a short-term expense targeting at post-pandemic gap closing? So I will say a lot of stakeholder feedback, a lot of positions have been listed. I would say we're looking at coaches as 3-year. I would definitely say that there's other positions and other ways, but that we need to make sure that we're looking at a defined period, or how are we going to add that in the budget? And obviously, the number of positions that have been recommended is not sustainable. That doesn't mean 3-year period is sustainable, and maybe something that's working, we get that into the budget. So that would be my caution as we're looking at that. So for opportunity for stakeholder input, we had our team leaders working with their teams to provide input. Department chairs did the same thing at the high school level. Principals met with the teachers, both the team leaders and department chairs. We've discussed it at many of our cabinet meetings, and then based on a lot of that information, we sent the survey out. We wanted to make sure the survey captured everyone, so it went to families, students, and employees. So we had 217 respond, and of families, that was 131, students 34, and I did enjoy some of the students' suggestions. Sometimes this is just a way for people to provide feedback that it doesn't necessarily fall under federal stimulus. School staff, 63, Board of Education, 2, community members, 24, and other were 4. So that is the breakdown of where we got the information. So again, we provided it in categories, and we were asking them, 1 was a low priority, 3 was a high priority. So we asked them first about the first category, the broad umbrella was facilities and operation, safety and security, things like cameras. We had 68 respond that was low, 68 it was in the middle, and 83 listed that as a high priority. Outside learning and eating spaces, some of our examples were the pavilion that we've talked about, courtyard we've talked about right out at this area, and exterior Wi-Fi. So we had 61 consider that a low priority, 87 were in the middle, and 69 considered that a high priority. Educational technology upgrades, wireless network infrastructure, PA system, phone system, some examples that we provided. We had 36 list that as a low priority, 93 were in the middle, and 88 was a high priority. So you can see a lot fell into the 2 and 3 under this, this specific one. The next one, even more so, was ventilation and air filtration. So we listed univents, air handlers, windows, and air conditioning. Maybe because this went out during the hot weather months, it could be slanted in some way. I would say a lot of people added air conditioner in the open-ended feedback too. Low priority was only 15, mid was 52, and 150 considered this area a high priority. Academic programs and opportunities. So summer programming, tutoring, summer school, counseling support, credit recovery. We had 37 listed as low, 89 mid, and 91 high. So you can tell that that's an important area. Same with the next one, which is after-school academic programming. So we listed after-school help, tutoring, late bus. We had only 11 say it was a low priority, 61 was middle, and 145 was high priority under this area. Academic intervention support, these were small group interventions and tutoring, 31 low, 75 mid, and 111 high. And then enrichment programs, 27 low, 78 mid, and 112 high. So definitely under the academics, we're seeing threes showing the highest. Under social, emotional, and mental health support, this is mental health services, community-based counseling, and home to school. I mean, this is a lot of where we're getting feedback on potential social worker, and we're looking at what is it that they want from that person, and how can we get that in different ways, and what do we really need? Because we will all agree that we need to support our students. 28 consider this low, 59 mid, and 130 high priority. Early education, which is our universal pre-K, that we talked about that at our last board meeting, 58 low, 72 mid, and 87 as a high priority. And the last question was professional learning for educators, instructional coaching, conferences, workshops, 47 low, 105 in the middle, and 65 listed it as a high priority. So then there was areas for additional suggestions. I would say that there was diverse suggestions by our stakeholders, but they definitely, most of them fell under themes that fit within these categories. So we will really look at those more carefully as we move forward. A lot of things I started to even put into categories, federal stimulus versus capital work, so things that were, you know, if we are going to look at air conditioning, that's probably a capital project, not federal stimulus. So the higher end capital work, we will look at it all and we will look at some costs, but I started to put in, because we know we're going to be looking at a capital work. I mean, a couple people even mentioned the ag and the technology area, federal versus capital, so I definitely have a list going when we start working on our capital. And then there were some comments just about general maintenance, so I put that in a list to look at for maintenance and general budget. And that was, you know, just repairs and painting that people listed under this area. So moving forward, the plans will be submitted to the State Education Department review and approval. We asked for that extension. We were focused on ending the school year. Now this week and next week, we will be focused, working heavily on this. We are still waiting for our architect. They have been sending us estimates on some of the work that we're looking at, so obviously we needed those estimates to put any kind of budget together. The plans will be posted to the GCS website, and what I think is important to note is the plans are flexible and fluid. You are allowed to make amendments to the plans based on our needs. So it's not what we say today lives forever, because we're going to be spending this money for 3-4 years. If we put something in and we now say, you know, we really should spend it this way, we can make that amendment request to the state. So I think that's important to note, that it's not, we don't have any ability to make changes. So that was my update on the survey.
Tammy, can I ask?
Yes.
Did anybody talk about, we've talked in the past about maybe trying to do a lacrosse as an additional sport. Did that come up at all?
Football is the only sport that was mentioned, and from a student.
Well, we've
on
already
this-
talked about football a number of times.
I know, I'm just saying.
I don't want to go back there again. I got beat up on
Lacrosse was not mentioned
that.
on this survey.
Okay. Will you get active, will you, lady? It wasn't mentioned, huh? Huh? Bowling. I can be your coach. I can be your coach.
Tammy, when do you think the plan will be available for us to review?
I would say that we're going to definitely be working on it this week and next week. I would, when did I say it's due? So I'll be sharing it with you probably by the end of next week. Just one. Yeah, just one is due. Obviously, I want to work on the framework for all of it.
I
So,
think
but, I
the,
mean, basically, what we just said are the things that, items that are going to be in it.
the portal for the ARP opened will open as of tomorrow.
It's due August 13th, the ARP one.
It can be submitted anytime.
Yes, it can be submitted anytime,
Okay.
yes. I would like to work on them both together, not.
Right, that's what I meant, I
Yes.
guess. It makes sense because if.
And then
we're
we get
just-
feedback quicker from the state.
True.
So the direction sounds good to me. I mean, I know from, obviously from the various stakeholder feedback you've gotten, I think from comments from the board in terms of the direction, it all sounds good. My concern is, us having time to review it, to review the actual plan, to provide feedback that can be considered before it has to be submitted. And my concern is if we see it and then don't get to discuss it until, what's our meeting, July 13th? I think, and it has to be
12th.
12th, but then it has to be uploaded the July 15th. I don't think that gives us enough time to have that feedback incorporated. So,
I would ask you for feedback right now if there's something that you think is something that I haven't mentioned. I mean, we're going to be looking at everything and creating pathways for it.
I understand, but I think it's a difference between like having the high level, again, like the direction we're going versus like the actual plan. And it's the actual plan that I don't want to say I have a concern. I'm not concerned about what the plan will be or think that there will be anything out of left field that we're not aware of that's, we're really going to have to scramble for. But more just the opportunity for the board to review the actual plan and provide feedback before it's filed. And, I know it takes a lot of time to do it, and I'm not sure what the answer is because I don't have a clear timeline in my head of when that plan will be ready for like review versus filing. I mean, I can't remember what date the end of next week would be. Like, I'm willing to meet again. I don't know what the other board members think about that, but to meet again, if there were an opportunity to review the plan, then have the board meet before the 12th.
12th is 2 weeks away.
Yeah. And if the draft is ready in a week, I don't even know if there's time for that.
So, can I ask this question as far as the flexible and fluid? What you submit on the 15th is just a framework, and that as far as the flexible and fluid, we can be making changes through August, September, October.
You can file amendments. I mean, I'm not going to upload anything until the board sees it.
Right, right. But I hear where Jay's coming from, is he'd like to see a
like to look
draft
at the
along the
final
way and be able to comment with, some understanding of what you put together, but I also don't want you to feel rushed. that
Well, I'm
you-
still waiting for some figures from the architect is the problem too. And they were on site today and they're waiting for them from the vendors. And the vendors are providing estimates to a lot of different people. That's the problem when every district gets an amount of money at the same time. Every district is trying to do similar work.
I'm just looking at my calendar.
Okay. I mean, we can try to get a draft framework out to the board.
10th? Is that the Friday? That's what I'm trying to figure out.
The 2nd,
9th?
July 2nd is this Friday.
That's way too early for anybody.
And remember, next week, we got improvement on the 7th and the 8th.
No, and that's what I'm trying to keep in
I know.
reference, is that everybody's got stuff to do. Would having a draft copy for us to review on the 9th, so we could,
Look at it over
on the weekend, would that be possible? Is that
I
too
will
hard?
send you whatever I have by the 9th.
Okay.
And try to make it as inclusive as, but if there might be some spaces that we're waiting for dollar amounts or something, or I have to put in an estimate.
I mean, I'm fine with that if it's incomplete. I mean, if waiting on details or things, but it still will be going from like this high level view, something down to more granular where we understand better. And again, it's not, I'm not saying this because I have a concern like with what you're going to put in there, what might ultimately be in, but it's more from my perspective as a board member and the significant amount of money involved.
I would say
having that
definitely I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Definitely the first one that's due. I would say, I'm not trying to rush in 1 week, the 2 million that we don't have to submit until mid-August.
But they're kind of, they're so interrelated.
They are interrelated, but I don't think I'm going to have those both done. I will have a framework and list everything that we feel is going to fall under it.
For the 3.67?
Right. Let me see what we can do.
Okay.
You're not interested in dollar amounts as much as items.
That's right. That's right. Right. I mean, dollar amounts more like order of magnitude, you know, like just to show. But even that.
Well, that's
less
easier than
important.
just to give you a framework of some of the things that we're looking.
Thanks. And I mean, to be clear, I'm not asking for something different, like now go develop a framework so I can understand. I'm fine with if by, you know, if it's possible by the 9th to get like whatever you have, you know, understanding it's going to be incomplete, there'll be holes, but I think that it probably will be complete enough to understand like now more, you know, at a more granular level what the plan will show, so that if I or anyone else has a chance to review it, has suggestions that it, you know, can be considered. I think, you know, it could be shared in advance of the meeting. There might be some more time there for that to be considered and reflected. It's possible we'll look at it and no one will have any suggestion like that, and you know, that's great. Certainly would make it easier for you, right? But you know, I think for things like this, I just appreciate having that time and opportunity for the board to provide feedback. So, you know, if we can see what you have, you know, by then, again, with the understanding that it's still a work in progress, it's appreciated.
Okay,
Thank you, Tammy.
you're welcome.
Is it, Tim, is it possible to take the presentation and add it to the agenda?
Sure.
Okay. And the same thing for Todd's also?
So,
What did you just add to the agenda?
Right now, looking on the agenda, it was just under discussion, but there's no, the presentation that Tammy just gave, if we could, if I want to go back to it and refer to it, I can just click on the agenda and read it.
we'll also add it to the website so that everyone can see the results of the survey. Who took it?
Okay. Moving on. Items for discussion at your next meeting.
Like how she said your next meeting?
I've got one, Pat. We will absolutely miss you, and thank you for everything. But the other thing I wanted to ask is we're obviously now back in person because the executive session expired, and so all board meetings are now back in person. And so one of the things that we've been doing all along is we've been recording our presentations. And so I just wanted to throw it out there. How do we feel about continuing to record it? If people have thoughts and so forth. So I don't know if we want to talk about it now, if we want to add it to next month's agenda. That's a question.
I'm fully in support of continuing recording.
I'd like to continue it.
I agree. I'd like to continue the live stream and the recording. I don't know if there's a difference, honestly.
Whatever's on YouTube.
Right. I
Right.
assume we could record and make it available, but not live stream it.
The live stream can be recorded. The recording is, I think she means live streaming as opposed to recording.
think
What
she
we're
means-
doing and then goes on YouTube. So for example,
It goes on YouTube all the way out right now, live,
yes.
and then it's recorded, then it's posted as a complete meeting afterwards, so you can go back and review it.
Correct.
You mean live streaming though?
Yes. Whatever we're doing now, I'd like to continue.
I'm not against it at all.
I'm not against it. I'm just, I don't think does it need a motion? I don't think so. We just continue, correct?
What's the impact? Scott's time?
Well, Scott was usually here for our meetings anyway, wasn't he?
Never.
Never?
They didn't need to be.
He's the only one against it.
Budget time.
Is there someone else that we could use if Scott doesn't?
All right, I think this,
Yeah, I know. I was kidding.
I think just that since we have a little confusion here, maybe we need to have as a topic for discussion. Next meeting.
But could we continue what we're doing until we, have that discussion and decide, keep it, chuck it, or change it? Thank you.
I don't want to step on Pat's toes, because maybe she had a speech in mind, but I'd like to thank Pat for her time, especially for welcoming me on the board since I tried to get her voted out the first time around.
You are a very
Well,
welcome
you
addition,
beat me.
Dave.
But I don't want to end the year without saying thank you to the admin and the teachers and the bus drivers and the custodians and the cleaners and anybody else that's on the staff. COVID was something that was unusual, but I really want to thank the students because if they didn't do what they were supposed to do, the biggest thing I was afraid of in August was the students. But they pulled it off with some great guidance, apparently. So thank you.
Agree.
Anybody else?
Are we going to ask the two new principals to?
If you would like to.
Put them on the spot.
We'll start with Christy first, if you would just to share a few minutes with the board.
What are you looking for? Would you want me just to share my background? What do you?
A little bit, whatever you want.
You want me to tell jokes? Like,
Do we scare the hell out of you?
no.
Oh, okay. Well,
Good.
I'm Christy Gorrigan. I am currently an assistant principal in Mohonasen. I'm very excited to start here as a principal at the high school. My background is in special education. I've done some. I was a CDOS coordinator before that. The school I lived out in Buffalo for about 20 years. I'm originally from this area, but I lived in Buffalo for 20 years. I was a CDOS coordinator out there, and that really it was very interesting. I did that for about 1 year before we moved back here, and so for the past 5 years, I've been back in town, and I'm really excited to start my journey here. Like, I want to start tomorrow.
Thank you.
So you're from Buffalo?
Thank you.
I live there.
Can you spell Skajak with it backwards?
I can't, but I lived in Cheektowaga, and nobody knew how to say that either, or spell that, so. Yeah, that's a
Buffalo
hard.
State.
Oh, okay,
Oh, yeah.
all right, I went to Damon College.
And then Matthew.
Good evening, everyone. How are y'all doing?
Good.
My name is Matt Berkshire. I am originally from Western New York, a village called Fredonia.
Okay.
Familiar with the university there? Oh, is that
Yeah.
worse? I was an elementary school teacher in South Carolina and New York City before becoming an administrator. Over 10 years as a teacher, I worked with all students in grades pre-K through 5. A classroom teacher, math teacher, as well as an ESL teacher teaching language in Brooklyn and Bronx. I became an administrator around the year 2013, where I was an assistant principal at PS 84, Williamsburg, Brooklyn. PS 84 was a PSMS. We had an elementary school and a middle school. I eventually married a girl from Brooklyn, and we kind of came to a compromise between being able to move back to Western New York and being able to get out of the city. So we moved up here, coming up to the Catskills, and the Adirondacks was something that we did a lot of as we were starting our family. settled into Middleburg. And I'm currently elementary school principal in Schenectady at Page Elementary School. And super proud of the work that we've done there, but I'm also super proud to join this school district. As a resident of nearby Middleburg, I realize how important the school districts are to all of our students and all of our families here in all of our villages and our hamlets and our towns and the Catskills. And I'm really proud to be a member of this team. And I've heard nothing but great things as I've told people that I was interested and I was going through the process with Greenville. So honored to be here, and thank you for everybody who participated in the hiring process, and nice job on the presentation. Can't wait to have to do it. Congratulations on your, I tried to get you in earlier. Congratulations on your job as well.
Well, thank you both. You're welcome.
Yes.
Dan, you're going to be missed. Lots of luck.
I appreciate all of that. I love the focus on the new crew that's coming in. I think they're going to be great addition to this.
Dan can't handle attention, so he quickly diverts it. We are going to miss you, Dan.
Thanks, Scott.
Stay in touch.
Okay. Or closing forum. We have any people?
As long as we're waiting on the open forum, can we discuss next meeting to a different way of doing the open forum remotely? Or whether we would just have open forum in the open meetings? In other words,
I think that can be a question. If people want to speak, should they come in person and you still live stream?
maybe if you want to open forum remotely, they can put the questions in and we'll deal with them in the closing open forum, but not try to go through emails in the beginning. You know what I'm saying? We do a 4 or 5 minute pause every week, every meeting, waiting for an open forum, and I think we've had 2 questions in the whole year. If we're going to have open again, why not have the open forum where everybody can see it rather than an email? But we can discuss it next time.
Anybody else? Okay, then I need a motion to adjourn to executive session, at which time we will return to public session and there will be no decisions made. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.